With this, I'm delighted to introduce our first keynote speaker, Professor Claudio Sunkel. So Professor Sunkel is a professor of molecular biology and the director for the Institute for Research and Innovation in Health in the University of Porto in Portugal. Within his institute, he is also the head of Cell Division and Genomic Stability Group, and his laboratory is mostly devoted to the study of cell division and of the mechanisms involved in maintaining genomic stability in higher eukaryotes. He has served as Vice President of the European Molecular Biology Conference and has served as both Vice President and Chair of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory Council. We've had many interesting discussions already about science and about his research institute and about the supports that he can provide to his researchers in Portugal. And we're delighted that he could join us today to share his perspective through his keynote talk on real-world impact of fundamental research.
So good morning. I have to say that I will not dare to try Gaelic. Sorry, I tried this morning and I failed miserably. I'm really honored. It's a really, when I received the invitation, I said, why me? I mean, I'm a small guy in a little country somewhere stuck in the corner of Europe. And then when the next day, when I said, well, I love challenges, so maybe I'll go, I'll do it. And then a few days later, Ted emailed me, said, well, thank you very much, it's great. Can I give you a title? I said, wow, come on. And he said, real world impact on fundamental research. And then I froze. I said, what should I do now? So what I'll try to do in the next half an hour is to tell you a little bit about my thoughts about this question. And then if I don't get too late, I'll just put my timer here. Then I'll tell you a little bit about my institute, which surprisingly has a name which is almost the same as yours. So we are the Institute for Research and Innovation in Health. So the real question here is, the first thing I thought is, why the hell did he ask me what is the real world impact of fundamental research? I mean, those guys who are floating in space, you would never ask them what is the importance of fundamental research. They would just fall down. I mean, there's no point. Or if you think about, asking questions about fundamental physics, fundamental research is essential. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Or even, understanding our code of life, our genetic code, all of it is underpinned by fundamental research. The problem really is that in the last few years, we have to be dealing with a different kind of animal, which is the politician, which is learn this word impact. Impact has to be written there. And the cycle of the political world is not the cycle of scientific research. And therefore, the problem we have at the moment is that we have to fulfill, we have to deal with them, we have to talk to them. Why has this come about? I mean, we have to really look at the bigger problem, and the bigger picture is really this one. We are losing we are not anymore the most innovative economies in the world. I mean, South Korea and Singapore are doing better than ours. So our competitors are doing better. And we need to really understand that although economies we move towards a knowledge-based economy, and research is a fundamental pillar, but the political cycle is short, and they want short-term results. And this is sort of linked a little bit, if you look a bit what is happening in terms of the global share of research output. We are losing out. That's just see the United States and China moving. And if you look at our countries, which are down there below, we are pretty much stable. So there is a problem, and this problem needs to be addressed. And the result for that is that we need to do more development, innovation. We need to get up to the South Korean and to Japan and all those countries who have developed a very research-intensive economy. And I can understand the politicians. But the problem is that we can understand the politicians, but this has come to a price. And the price is that If you look at NIH funding in translational clinical research and fundamental research, it's going down, and it's been going down for a number of years. And this is probably true. I don't know exact numbers. I looked at these numbers about Ireland. I know them better about Portugal, but I think most countries look pretty much the same as this. I mean, we have this now drive, which, you know, you find people who are absolutely basic scientists like me who deal with how cells distribute the chromosomes, how they divide, talking about technology transfer. And that's a little bit of a contradiction in terms, but that's the reality. The reality is now that we need to have impact. And for all of you who have to fill in project applications for funders, then you get to that final section which says economic impact, and you start thinking about, how do I do it? Well, you can use ChatGPT now and give you a good help. And it does give you a good help. You need to massage it a little bit towards the end. But it is true. I mean, we do need to have impact. I mean, on the other hand, think about it. You know, societies move forward because they do make an impact in the economic life. And although you might be living in a crystal tower somewhere doing your absolute pure research, at the end of the day, you know, you are funded by society, and we owe to society, and we need to think about it. So the question really is that I don't see any difference anymore. I've been involved in managing and driving the construction and the development of a very large research institute for the last 15 years in Portugal, and I don't see anymore any difference. For me, there is no difference between fundamental and applied research. It's just a question of time. How long does it take for a fundamental discovery to reach the market? And really, what really history tells us is that both fundamental and applied research are intimately interconnected, and they feed on each other permanently. Now, just to make things a little bit even more complicated for me, I decided to use I'll give you 3 or 4 examples about this. Then I decided to use the one that you would never guess that we use. And this is history. So backwards 500 years ago. So what these people were doing, and by the way, I'm not Portuguese. I was born in Chile. I consider myself a professional immigrant. I've lived in many countries. I lived 14 years in UK. But I've learned to study a little bit about the Portuguese history and the history of Portugal. I think the history of Portugal is not that different from Ireland. Although we're not an island, but you know, we are sort of an island because we have this big country on our back, which is called Spain, which we don't like at all. So the only thing left for the Portuguese was actually the sea. And that is what happened. 500 years ago, there was somebody with a vision. Somebody had a real vision, and this guy was a prince, Prince Henry, and he was called the Navigator. And he had this vision that Portugal could actually explore the sea. And for that, he was systematic. And if you think about this, it's really a scientific enterprise. He set up a school. I don't have a pointer, by the way, because this new technology does not allow me to point. So I couldn't do it. So in the far west corner of Portugal, he set up this maritime school. And the whole point was to explore the sea. He started to build, you you see a map, which is around 1420 or so, of the very first part of the northern coast of Africa, which they were exploring. And in the bottom part, you see the first real discovery that he made, was in 1458, which is Cape Verde. Cape Verde are located somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic between Senegal and Brazil. And that was a landmark because, these guys were, they had virtually no instruments, virtually no equipment. And they ventured miles and miles into the middle of the sea and they mapped it. It's just, you need to think that they were mapping slowly. It was like mapping the human genome. Slowly, they were mapping the coast and they were mapping the ocean. And that led, later on, he wasn't alive at the time, but he led the next king, which was Don Manuel I, to discover the passage to India. And that was 1497, a fundamental moment. Imagine that this trip took from Portugal to the Cape Verde, to the Cape of Good Hope and India and back, 2 years in the sea. It's amazing. And if you think about it, if I could point you to the first part of this trip, from Cape Verde to Good Hope, it would take about 4.5 months in the sea, straight. And on the way back, they would stop in one place near what is now called Mozambique. And then they go all the way around the coast until they reach Cape Verde, because they didn't want to be, hijacked by pirates and so on and so forth. So it was an amazing thing. But this was a scientific discovery. They built instruments. They built ships that they could actually take to the high seas for months. And they took instruments that could tell them where they were, and they could actually map themselves. And this led to a real scientific enterprise. Each ship that left the port in Lisbon had a crown clerk whose job was just to record everything in a book. What was the daylight? What was the wind? What were the currents? What were the time? What were the distances? And those books went all the way back to Lisbon to build maps, to build the actual maps and allow them to reach things. What was the outcome of this? The economic outcomes. You probably don't know, but in 1494, these two countries, Spain and Portugal, divided the world between themselves. In 1494, what is called the Tordesillas Treaty, which is signed by the Pope, by the way, they divided the world into two. An interesting sideline here. You notice that the division of the world was about 1,000 kilometers west of Cape Verde. Supposedly, Portuguese had never actually gone there. But if you draw the line, you see that a piece of South America actually belongs to Portugal. And that's Brazil. So historians still say that maybe the Portuguese were there before the official discovery of Brazil. Now we're going to move forward almost 400 years and something closer to you, something closer to what you know. We are now finished almost at the beginning of the end of the Second World War. So D-Day had taken place. And at that time, President Roosevelt writes a letter to the Director of Science, Technology and Research called Vannevar Bush. And in that letter, he says 4 points. He wanted to make known to the world as soon as possible the contributions which have been made during the world effort to scientific knowledge. He wanted to continue the war of science against disease, what can be done, how to organize a program for continuing in the work which has been done so far in medicine and related sciences. What can the government do in the future to aid research activities by public and private organizations? And finally, a program for discovering talent and retaining talent in the UK. Vannevar Bush was a fantastic person. He put together a team, and in less than a year, he wrote a book which was seminal. It is the birth of current scientific funding in the Western world. And the book was called Science, the Endless Frontier. Now, the title of the book is a fantastic concept because he really understood the nature of scientific discovery. He said he really understood that science is something that we will never reach the end. And we will never reach the end. That means we need to always move and move and move. And these are just 3 quotes from his book that tell us how deeply he understood about scientific discovery. So he says scientific progress is an essential key to better health, more jobs, higher standard of living, and our cultural progress. I mean, encompassing the whole of society. As long as scientists are free to pursue the truth, whatever they may lead, there will be a flow of new scientific knowledge to those who can apply it. So he was telling us that already, he had this vision that science was fueling translational work. And finally, I think the most important one of all is that scientific program on the broad front results from free play of free intellects working on subjects of their own choice in a matter dictated by curiosity for exploration of the unknown. A fantastic outcome of this is the National Science Foundation and a vision for the future, which is very important for us, which is that fundamental research is actually driven by curiosity. If we don't allow, I mean, I have always had, when I explain this to politicians, I said, imagine that we are planting a field and we have thousands of plants. We have to water them all because we don't know which plant is actually going to be flowering better and give you the best result. And that is the only way that we can move forward. And this notion that fundamental research fuels technological innovation and applied research. And I just put here a picture, a molecular picture of something that some of you might know. Any virologists here in the world, in the audience that might know? It's very dear to us. You've seen it 100 times. That's spike protein. That's the spike protein from SARS-CoV-2 bound to its receptor. And that is the outcome of fundamental research, which in less than 2 months after the discovery of SARS-CoV-2, the molecular structure of the protein was already described initially by AlphaFold and some subsequently by the work in EMBL and others. So fundamental research. I will go back to SARS in a little while. Just one more example before we talk a little bit about SARS is CRISPR. I mean, CRISPR is just a fantastic example about fundamental research. It took 25 or so years of people telling them that they were studying something that was absolutely worthless. It was how do bacteria fight their viruses? How do bacteria survive? I mean, Danone was interested because they used bacteria to make yogurt, so they were quite keen. But most of the rest of the world were not really interested until 2012, when Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Carpentier published their work on how to program this enzyme to do specific cuts in the DNA and to do something we now call gene editing. And, you know, all this now completely known by all of you, and you know about these details. But, you know, this came about of public money. Public money was put on research, people studying things that they were not sexy at the time. They were just, you know, they were somewhere in a corner in an institute doing this funny work on bacteria. And now it ends up that we are dealing with a 1 billion a year investment on CRISPR technologies by startups. And then we have a huge lawsuit between Berkeley and the Broad Institute, which is not resolved yet, about the patent, which is worth millions and millions and millions. So we just don't know. We have no idea where they're going to come from. But as a final example, I really have to dwell on COVID and what happened in COVID. I think COVID tells us teaches a lot of things from all areas of our society. First of all, it's interesting to look at this is a map of what happens. So we have 700 million people infected by this virus. 7 million people die of it. And it's interesting, first of all, to see that the profile of actual infection, the worst infection, it was in 2022. It wasn't before that. And we had the vaccine at the time. Anyway, remember, we've lost 2 years of memory. You do not remember what happened in 21 and 22, that are gone. I was lucky because I was working. My institute was fully doing 2 weeks after COVID came in, my institute was calling to do PCR tests because we had all the technology we can implement it very quickly. And therefore, I was driving on my car alone in the motorway for months, every morning. So it was important for me to that experience. But really what I wanted to break you is this. In April 2020, I was interviewed. I mean, the fancy thing, science was in the news every day, every hour of the day, for every day for 600 days or so. We were bombarded. People didn't know the difference between, so they wanted to treat COVID with antibiotics, and we had to explain to them there were bacteria and there were viruses, and there were a slight difference between the two of them. But even in April of that time, I was interviewed. One of the people, there were a lot of people being interviewed, and they asked me if I thought that the vaccine could be developed. And I said, before the end of the year, I'm sure there will be a vaccine. And it happened. It happened in November of that year. Pfizer and Moderna presented their work, and early in January, people started to get vaccinated, and the press went completely wild. We were all given a star to put on our shoulders. We were fun people to be with around, and they wanted to talk to us about everything we do, and they wanted to learn about our work and everything else. It's a pity that they forgot about us afterwards. But what the point that I wanted to make is that was built on fundamental science. Drew Weissman and Kathleen Carrico got the Nobel Prize for work that they did many years ago, who was refused publication for many years. Kathleen was almost thrown out of the university because their work on modifications of RNA, they thought it was worthless. But the point was, if you injected RNA into an animal, it created a huge allergic reaction, so you couldn't do it. And what they did was learn about biology. So we know that RNA gets modified in many different sites, and therefore those modifications appear to be essential for the working of that. But they turned out to be essential because they brought down completely the allergic reactions, and therefore messenger RNAs could be used. Who took those ideas forward was this German couple, actually, Mette Özlem Türeci in 2021. She gave us a talk in a conference we organized, sons and daughters of Turkish immigrants who came to Germany many years ago. And what they were doing is they were using this technology to try and develop cancer vaccines. This is a quotation of the market value of the company they set up. This is a few days ago. It's now worth 28 billion euros. I mean, this is the translation. This is what happens when the science is strong, when fundamental science is strong. And turned out that at the end of the day, these people actually saved, because the world stopped for 2 years, and that was significant. But we need to plead. I wish that my colleagues, not my colleagues, but your members of society that run science in Ireland, and the politicians who take decisions. So the message here, we need more funding for fundamental research. Why? Because the people who do the funders, the money that it's used for fundamental research is public money. Industry will not fund fundamental research. It will not do it. They will fund it later on a second cycle where new things can be developed. But the original fundamental work that may take 20 years will not be funded by industry. And that we know that. If you ever had a chance to read a book by Mariana Mazzucato called The Entrepreneurial State, you should do it, because she can tell you that virtually everything that is now commercial was actually developed by public money. And even if you look at the Horizon Europe budget, I mean, we are all hooked on Horizon Europe. We live on Horizon Europe these days. Only 70% of Horizon Europe is actually fundamental research. The rest is not fundamental research. It's many other things. And actually the biggest budget is on industrial competitiveness. So that's the world we live in. In the second part, which is 7 minutes that I'm left, I'll tell you a little bit about my institute. very quickly. So it's a private non-profit association of public interest. It was actually formally created in 2020, but it was built on 3 research institutes that fused together. And my job was actually been to fuse them together and now put them into one place. We are a large institute. We have 415 researchers with PhD, or 67 research groups. We run a very large number of projects, and we participate in PhDs. We do not award PhDs, but PhD students come to us and do the research with us. Our mission is to contribute to advancing the health sciences through excellence in research, training the new generation of scientists, providing advanced clinical services, transferring knowledge to the economy, and improving health literacy. Yes, I learned the words for the new scientific enterprise. All these words have to be there. So we have to do all this, and we do cancer, infection, and neurobiology. So, what is our ecosystem? Our ecosystem is based on fostering fundamental work on molecular and cellular basis of living system. But then we have groups doing translational work on disease, or we have people working on preventing diagnostics and therapeutic strategy. But if you look at the ecosystem, it's actually all of it is fueled by research. Research fuels industrial collaboration, science and society, transfer of knowledge, our university collaborations, PhD training, and our clinical services. We run this on the basis of shared scientific facilities, and that's an example that you are doing now. And this was built on the EMBL, European Molecular Biology Laboratory model. Everything is shared. And this is something that appears to attract a little bit of attention, which is, what do you mean by transversal unit? We want our researchers to spend 95% of the time thinking. That's what they're there for, to think and to create and to imagine. We don't want them to fill in forms. We don't want them to worry about whether they have the correct data protection. We don't want them to worry about human resources. They work for thinking. The rest we take care of. Pre-award, post-award. Why? Because it's a lot of work. And those, all those systems, they take about 3.5 million euros in salaries, but it's worth it because people can spend their time doing research. This is what we are based on. So we are based on we have 3 lines: cancer, infection, immunity, and regeneration, neurobiology and neurological disorders. And this is our field. Research groups belong to one, but they can belong to more than one, and they can collaborate. This is more of just an organizational way of doing it. And over the years, we've learned to like and enjoy technology transfer because you can actually enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun to make something that somebody can actually use. So we have antimicrobial system, developments of things for fetal, for bone disease. The Euromonitor is a recurrence of bladder carcinoma. All these things have an impact, and it's important. Patents are not worth anything if you cannot put them to use, and that's a big, big challenge. So I can make patents anytime, but to license them and make something out of it is something a little bit more complicated. But we went, and this was a decision taken many years ago, to go into clinical services. We do molecular pathology and genomics of cancer, genetics and counseling of neurological disorders, and we work with hospitals on infectious diseases, looking at environmental and different types of infections. So, and this is a very important part of our work. The last few minutes, just to give you a field, this is what's been happening. From 2015 to 2020 really is the history of the 3 institute. We became fully operational in 2022. And what you see there is a 25% jump, and the jump comes from getting ready for Horizon Europe. We started to get ready for Horizon Europe in 2020. So when Horizon Europe came, we just submitted our applications. And that was fundamental, very important. And this just gives you a little bit about the financial sustainability of the work. First of all our funding is competitive, all of it, being their core funding or employment or competitive research and so on. And our global budget at the moment is about 40 million. So I'll give you an idea of what we are, and now I'll leave you with a 2.5-minute movie that we made we have been evaluated 2 weeks ago. We were beginning of stage of evaluation for our 5-year cycle. So we made this little movie that might inspire you.
Driven by a passion for discovery, we aim to improve health and quality of life through cutting-edge research and innovation. But who are we, really? Building upon our legacy of excellence and scientific achievements, we foster a collaborative ecosystem where great minds from different backgrounds and expertise can come together, be inspired, and dare to achieve more and better. We don't just share state-of-the-art facilities and the latest equipment. We share the same dedication and determination to uncover fundamental principles, decoding the secrets of biological organization, and understanding the mechanisms that sustain life, from the infinitely small to the entire organism. Our labs have achieved many tangible and groundbreaking milestones in key areas such as cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, immunity, infection, and regenerative medicine. Still, this is a continuous and relentless pursuit. As society's needs evolve, so too does the demand for new and more effective solutions. Developing early diagnosis techniques, innovative therapies, and precision medicine tailored to individual needs are just some of the expectations placed upon us. That's why our connection to society is vital. To raise awareness, share knowledge, and strengthen our ties with the pharmaceutical and clinical fields. In the end, the unbridled chase for scientific breakthroughs that I3S undertakes every day comes down to having a real impact on people's lives. Who are we then? We're the driver for a healthier tomorrow. For each of us, for all of us. I3S, Institute for Research and Innovation in Health.
Thank you very much.